There has been something of an argument, and it's been a constant refrain in the first 12 months of this government, that those who shouldn't have power, essentially. It's a silly argument, in my view. The argument runs something like this. Because you once bought a pie at some sort of arms industry conference, or you used to work in a particular industry, you shouldn't be allowed to be the minister for that particular area anymore, which sort of means that, if, for example, it was the Labour Party, if I was a trade union leader, I couldn't be the Minister of Employment or the Minister of Labour Relations. I mean, it's a little bit silly. Or if I'm a doctor, I couldn't be the Minister of Health, But there is that argument, not to be fair, not run much by the Labour Party, but tends to be run more by the media, that people have a conflict of interest if they work somewhere. Yes, but conflicts of interest can arise in different ways. So there is that argument, and you've probably been introduced to that over the last 12 months. But no, the Auditor General's just come out recently and had a real go at this government over the way in which it apportioned $20 million worth of money, which is an awful lot of money. I think it's $4 million over 5 years, or it might be $5 million over 4 years, something like that, for the I Am Hope Trust, the Mike King Trust that was set up, the Mental Health Trust, and how it didn't go through the normal channels, and yet he got it at a time when NGOs, particularly in the mental health area, but throughout the country, are being chopped because there simply isn't enough money. Suddenly there was this announcement that Mike King and his charity would get $20 million worth of government money. And it was announced, I think, by the Mental Health Minister. Is he our first Minister of Mental Health? Matt Ducey, anyhow, along with the Prime Minister. Well, it ran into problems, and we'll come and talk about those problems in just a second with Ingrid Leary. But one of those problems, I have to say, was the Auditor General, who wasn't very happy. And joining us to talk about that and a number of other issues from the political environment is the Labour Member of Parliament for Tairi, Ingrid Leary, and she joins us now. Ingrid, welcome to the show. Love to have you on again.
Thanks, Michael. And yes, it was $24 million over 4 years.
Right, $6 million a year. Thank you very much. Now, at the heart of it, it seems that Gumboot Friday and I Am Hope Charity is a good thing. Yes? No?
Well, it's hard to know. I don't have any beef with the organisation, but how do we know on a value for money basis if due process hasn't been followed? So my point, and I think the point that could be made by the Auditor General in his comments, is you give $24 million unilaterally to one organisation because that's what you promised in a coalition agreement, without looking across the sector to say what else could taxpayers have bought for that money to achieve the same or similar ends. So if that's the equation, then I think it is premature to say there is value for money unless that process has happened.
It's a hard thing to do, though, isn't it? And it's been a test in all my life in politics of saying that something is value for money when it comes to mental health. It's a very difficult game to play. Do you accept that?
I do. I also accept that there is, social scientifically verified analysis, including with groups like Impact Lab, who do a very good and science and evidence-based calculation of what might be the return on investment. So I don't have any beef with them. The issue is that with mental health, if there's an intervention, unless it's negative or dangerous or unsafe, one would expect a positive return on the investment. But without looking across other organisations, saying that $5.70 value for money per dollar spent doesn't mean anything unless it's relative. And that's the issue with using the Impact Lab report, which is what the Minister did to justify this, along with saying he was using the coalition agreement, which the Auditor General has made very clear is a political document and is not part of procurement process and should not be relied on by itself to justify taxpayer spend.
You see, there I probably disagree with you. I'll push back on that just for one sec. If you go to the election saying we are going to support this organisation, we think they haven't had a fair go in the past, and they do stuff that we don't believe other mental health organisations do, and you go and to the electorate on that, and then you write it into a political agreement, isn't that just as valid as a procurement process through a whole series of nameless, faceless, and generally unaccountable health bureaucrats?
I don't think so, because what it's assuming is that everybody who voted for the political party, and in this case it's 3, so we don't know, who voted for which part of the policy platform. There's an assumption that they supported every policy that party put forward. We don't know that. Yes, it's in a coalition agreement, but there still needs to be transparent and accountable procurement, and ideally competitive procurement. Our democracy is as good as the institutions. That is the basis of a good, strong democracy, are the institutions that support that. And we know that those fundamental principles are fairness, transparency, accountability. We don't seem to have those in this case.
Yeah, but I'd argue that that's true of the public sector too, Ingrid. The truth of the matter is that the public sector have made some horrendous mistakes in mental health in the last 30 years, as you well know. And there's no suggestion. Yeah, carry on.
I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you. Look at what the impact is, though. The impacts are very real. So these are kind of lofty, concepts, I agree. But the impact is that there are organisations who have been delivering mental health services in communities, often in remote communities, who have very good track records, who the communities attest are critically important because they have wraparound support, particularly, say, for vulnerable children. So they might have had oranga tamariki contracts where they support families. Their funding has been cut and there is no alternative funding, and they were locked out of bidding for the Gumboot Friday Fund. The other fund that was... but
they're two different things, though, Ingrid. Oranga tamariki, yeah, carry on.
No, not necessarily, because the money for Gumboot Friday, they've been locked out of that procurement. They are delivering mental health counselling services, in some cases, such as the Home Builders Group in Warkworth. Their money came from Oranga tamariki. The Minister for Children is in the House saying, that's not core business, not my problem, someone else will fund it. Then you go to the Minister of Mental Health and say, you're going to fund it, where's the funding? He hasn't even had those discussions. So he hasn't asked across the sector, what will the impact be on mental health community groups by the contract cuts for Oranga tamariki? Now, if you couple that with the procurement on the other hand for well, he is the Minister of Mental Health. But
that's fine. But I mean, if Oranga tamariki make a decision... Yeah, but if Oranga tamariki make a decision that they're not going to fund a mental health provider for God knows what reasons, anything from quality to, I guess, the money's simply not there, it's a bit tough for Matt Dooley to, in actual fact, go, oh gosh, I don't know, every NGO in the mental health sector and their funding. I mean, that would be impossible to do. There must be hundreds, thousands.
Well, two things. As if I was a minister, I would be asking, what is the impact of those contract cuts going to be on the mental health sector? That's his job to advocate, and he is on record saying that. And secondly, the fact that the money is not there is because $24 million worth of it has gone to Gumboot Friday. Now, that may be a good decision. We don't know because we can't assess based on the procurement that's been done.
I guess we can assess it, though, and I imagine it will be monitored during the time. It's $6 million a year. I mean, in terms of the bucket of health funding, it's quite small. But I understand your objection, don't get me wrong. But I just wonder, Mike King's responded to this criticism, and I don't know if you've been in any conversation with him at all, have you?
No, he hasn't approached me.
With all due respect, couldn't you approach him?
Well, I don't think he's necessarily done anything wrong. This is about the minister and the procurement. He has received government money for a service that he passionately believes in, and it is for the minister and the government to determine before they give that money, is this money well spent? There's an Impact Lab report that says, $5.70 return on a dollar investment. When I look at the modelling of that, the indicators are things like felt better after 2 sessions of counselling. They're quite subjective indicators. I would have preferred to see things like was able to attend school again. Yeah, but there are still stronger ways to assess it. And the other thing is that the data that...
How? Seriously? How, other than asking the person who's receiving the counselling, would you? I mean, you'd have to bring in, a psychologist or a psychiatrist to test you to see that you're okay or not?
So subjective questionnaires are valuable, but things that are a little bit more concrete, like was able to resume activities that I couldn't do previously, that would be a stronger indicator. And also the outputs that were measured, which are a number of sessions delivered, were provided unilaterally by the organisation. Those were not verified by Impact Lab. There's a caveat in the report. And they also the whole data wasn't verified by Ministry, which I would have thought was just due diligence and peer reviewing. So the data may well be accurate, but we don't know that. And so that does mean that all the conclusions that are drawn from that are based on assumptions that are accepted at face value. And this is the problem with having an organisation commission its own report rather than having a ministry do the due diligence.